Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the fight. This will be a 12-round battle between Fortinet and Sonicwall to see who walks away the No, wait, no, never mind. This is just me saying what is good and bad about both brands. And me, of course, being Michael Weir, your Fortinet NSE 7 certified technical account manager for Fortinet here Ingram Micro, to walk you through this today. So let's start off with a news flash. So cybersecurity moves quickly, your vendor of choice should too. We're talking about agility, we're talking about breadth of products here, and in this Sonicwall versus Fortinet comparison, we're going to break it down into three areas. Number one is what the two vendors offer. Number two is what the industry says about the two vendors, and number three is what I say. You might be able to guess my opinion, but either way, that's the most important section, what I say. Not really. Here we go. First, take a look at what they offer. So Sonicwall and Fortinet are both relatively full-line vendors compared to a lot of the other security solutions out there. They're both going to have all your basics, firewall switches, access points. They're both going to have SaaS security, email security, endpoint protection, and some public cloud security. Where Fortinet is pulling ahead is, number one, they offer a cellular failover device in the form of FortiExtender. They also offer two-factor authentication and a WAF. But then you'll notice that I grayed out a few of the areas that Sonicwall still has, so like the switches and the access points. So going forward in this presentation, what I'm going to focus on, or at least in this section of this presentation, is the things that are in everybody's core, which are the firewalls, the switches, and the access points. So let's look at firewalls first, since these are both primarily firewall vendors. Well, not primarily firewall vendors. They're both something you would think of first when you're thinking of firewalls. These are, when those names will come into your mind. Fortinet has a lot of size and scale in their firewall line. Sonicwall I refer to as SMB only. Now, some of you might say, well, that's medium enterprise you're getting into there. Well, if we break down like cost performance and that sort of thing, it's not getting practical up at the top of the line with Sonicwall. But either way, Fortinet, size and scale. And Sonicwall's SMB, or small to medium enterprise only, both of them have the same smallest firewall, which is 150 megabits per second threat protection. But Fortinet continues to scale way beyond Sonicwall because the largest non-chassis Fortinet is 100 gigabits per second threat protection. The largest firewall from Sonicwall is 33.5 gigabits per second. And even if you need to go beyond that, Fortinet has chassis models that can offer a plethora of ports, can offer more throughput, all that sort of thing, whereas Sonicwall only has fixed models. So Fortinet is going to size and scale much further into the enterprise space than Sonicwall is going to. And let's take a look at some point products in that. And these are speeds for SSL inspection. Just as a quick aside, over half of the traffic, and typically more like 75 to 80% of the web traffic going through firewalls these days is encrypted. So if you don't have something on your firewall or some device in your network that can decrypt that SSL traffic for inspection so that it gets scanned by the same security engines as your non-encrypted traffic, then you're not scanning the majority of your traffic, and what are you really doing at that point? So looking at SOHO, this is the devices we'd recommend there. Sonicwall, pretty clear they named theirs that. Their newest SOHO is the SOHO 250, and Fortinet, the FortiGate FG40F. You can see a comparison for SSL inspection speeds there, 310 megabits per second versus 50. Now, I am just sitting at home in my basement like a lot of people are right now, and I have a 100 megabit per second connection to my house. So if I were to put a SOHO 250 in my house, I would still be suffering a bandwidth restriction. I'm not even a business. All right, let's look at the SMB level. So here we're hitting into a little bit more mid-range devices. The FortiGate 80F gets 715 megabits per second. The TC400 gets 180. Once again, if we're going into environments that are going to be a little more business-like, they're going to need throughput. And for roughly the same price, you're getting a lot more from the FortiGate. And now let's look at the small enterprise, SE. I forgot I was abbreviating the others. I wasn't going to type it out here, even though SE might be a little bit confusing. The FortiGate 100F is a full gigabit per second firewall, even with SSL inspection enabled, whereas the NSA 3650 is only 320 megabits per second. So at this point, it's over 3 times the speed difference. And then if we talk about our medium enterprise, and remember I said that I don't think Sonicwall goes a whole lot bigger than this. You saw my numbers on this previous slide. Yeah, they do all go up to 33 gigabits per second. Maybe you could call it a large enterprise, but your price performance ratio is pretty whack at that point. For the FG300 is 3.9 gigabits per second. The NSA 4650 is 675 megabits per second. So, and this comes down to architecture too, that Fortinet simply has better ASICs. They make their own chipsets. They do things in the hardware that Sonicwall has to do in the software. It's just a simple thing of hardware superiority at this point, getting them more throughput. And then let's look at the services you can get on those firewalls. So this is Sonicwall's top package, AGSS Advanced Gateway Security Suite. It's everything you would have with your normal UTM, the IDS, IPS, gateway, antivirus, anti-spam, application control, web filtering, then the ATP portion and sandboxing. So let's compare that to the top package from Fortinet, which is the 360 protection package. As you can see, we've still got the UTM features up there. We've still got the ATP feature up there. But we've also got content disarm and reconstruction, which is part of ATP, where let's say you have a PDF come in that has some malicious code embedded in an image inside it. The FortiSandbox can take a look at that, can say, all right, well, I don't need to discard the whole thing. I just need to strip that image. So let me strip that out, put it in a placeholder, and send a document on, instead of just destroying the whole thing and nothing ever getting there. We also have botnet IP and domain filtering services. We have a security rating service, which is like a self-audit that the firewall will do on itself to say, hey, here's the holes in your policies, here's things that might not comply. Obviously, it doesn't replace like a full penetration test or something, but it's a good way to keep you in line with best practices. They have an industrial security service in the Fortinet 360 package. What this does is scans your ICS protocols, non-IP protocols such as SCADA to give them protection too. They have SD-WAN cloud monitoring. You can probably figure that one out. OCVPN controller is just a quick way to set up full mesh VPNs or complicated VPN topologies and have them managed and monitored through the cloud. And then FortiManager and FortiAnalyzer Cloud would be our main centralized analysis and reporting engine. Comes as part of the package. It's not a separate purchase when you're getting the 360 package like GMS would be from Sonicwall. So we knocked out the firewalls and the packages there. Let's talk about the switches a little bit. Now, as you can see, Fortinet has a much wider variety of switches than Sonicwall, which isn't super surprising considering most of Sonicwall's switches are still based on the old Dell X series switches. So once again, this is size and scale versus SMB only. They both Sonicwall and Fortinet have things going down to just your little 8-port gigabit switch for your office. And Sonicwall goes up to 48 port of 1 gig and a 10 gigabit uplink. Fortinet has that, but they go all the way up to things you would find in a data center, such as their biggest being a 32-port 100 gigabits per second switch, so 32 ports of 100 gig, and everything else you can manage in between. They've got the 110, 2.5, 25, 40, and 100 gigabit port available in whatever kind of combination you want. Sonicwall switches are also primarily layer 2, some layer 3 static routing. Fortinets can be licensed even in standalone mode to be layer 2, 3, or what I call 3+, which is just more complicated stuff like BGP, ISIS, and VRRP. And then, this struck me as sort of weird. Sonicwall is touting the fact that you can manage their switches from their firewalls, but the maximum you can manage is 4. Even the smallest FortiGate, we were talking about the FG40F up there, can manage 8. And the largest can manage up to 256 per firewall. So even in the smallest, we've already doubled the scalability that Sonicwall has, and of course we go up from there. And let's talk about the access points. So 4 lines versus 2 lines. I know that isn't particularly informative, but let's break it down a little bit. In this case, Fortinet's got variety and flexibility, whereas Sonicwall is just a one-size-fit-most. So Fortinet has their base, cloud, secure, and universal series access points. Sonicwall says they have 2 series, 200 and 400 series sonic waves, but really they're basically the same, just with a different number of radios, 4 versus 2, you can figure out from the name. And in Fortinet's case, you can manage by FortiGate, cloud, or dedicated controller. Sonicwall is by the Sonicwall or by the cloud. And then if you look at Fortinet, you're doing local management, you can have up to 3,000 locally managed APs if you're using a dedicated controller. And if you're Sonicwall, if you're doing local management, the highest you can get is 192. So there's variety and flexibility there. Just to expand on the lines a little bit too, Sonicwall has your indoor, outdoor, and wall plate APs. And Fortinet has those things, indoor, outdoor, wall plate. They have things that are aimed to be point-to-point antennas. They can do full meshes. They have things that are meant to be like your desktop/travel models. They can do tunneling straight off the APs, so you can have a remote AP connection. There's just simply a lot more options available there. And as a full bonus, all of Fortinet's security products share security intelligence through the Fortinet security fabric. So these point products we're talking about, the firewalls, the switches, the APs, in Fortinet land, they all share threat intelligence with each other and say, hey, I've seen this, I'm sensing this, let's do some device detection. It all ties together, put in the endpoints, now you can start doing automations with your FortiAnalyzer. It's just a web of things. That's really outside of the scope of what we're talking about here, but just know that that exists. Let's go to number 2, what the industry says. This is a short one. So NSS Labs and Gartner, the 2 big organizations for ranking these things. Let's look at a couple areas here. NSS Labs security effectiveness. And this is actually based on a year-old set of numbers, but the reason I'm using it is because Sonicwall brags about these on their website still, so I figure let's hit them right where they are bragging. Fortinet has a 99.3% security effectiveness, Sonicwall 98.8. Sonicwall might say, oh, do you really need that extra 0.5%? I said, well, do you really want to take an extra 0.5% risk? If you're doing having heart surgery or something like that, do you want me to make the scalpel 0.5% less sharp? You want the best that's out there. And then another NSS Labs recommendations here, a number of areas in which they recommend the product: Fortinet 9, Sonicwall 1. And then if we're looking at security effectiveness, the other major question in it is total cost of ownership per megabit per second. It's half the cost per megabit per second protected, $2 versus $4. It's worth noting that those are the two lowest on the chart, so it's not as though Sonicwall is extravagantly expensive as, say, some other brands where you're paying for a nameplate and old technology, but we're still cheaper by half. And then in the Gartner UTM quadrant, Fortinet is in the leader quadrant, Sonicwall is in the niche player quadrant. And then just to pile onto that a little bit, if we look at the Gartner quadrant for SD-WAN, Fortinet is in the challenger quadrant, right on the border between challenger and leader, with the only people ahead of them being Versa and Silver Peak. Sonicwall was not even evaluated to be on the quadrant, so when it comes to SD-WAN, there's really no competition there. And I feel like that pretty much speaks for itself, so let's go on to what I say. And I have this in here so I don't want you to think I'm just Sonicwall basher. I'm just saying they're dumb or something like that, because from the 1990s, the late 90s up until probably about 2010, they were sort of synonymous with your SOHO/SMB firewall. And the question then comes, well, what happened? If you look at when they were founded, we've got a good stretch there. But in 2010, they were bought by an investor group. In 2012, they were bought by Dell. In 2016, they were bought by a private equity firm. Each of these changeovers, they were sort of allowed to languish for a bit during these changes of hands. So the technology you're getting, in a lot of cases, they're still using old Dell technology inside their stuff. For example, like I said, the X series switches are their integration. They're now owned by a private equity firm that doesn't have to report hardly anything on how they're doing. So this is a case where any sort of advancement that may have been made at any point was stymied by the fact that the company was constantly changing hands, and with changing hands oftentimes comes changing directions. So I'm favoring Fortinet, there's no real question there. And I would say there's a couple of reasons for that. And of course, the overarching one of anything Fortinet is the security fabric, that everything shares security intelligence. But the three that I'm pulling out here are the devices. We've got a much greater variety of devices for a much greater variety of purposes. We have the performance. We have faster, more modern appliances suited to today's needs, the SSL decryption and inspection, and the SD-WAN. Then recognition. Fortinet has more NSS Labs certification than any other major security vendor. We're 10 times in a row Gartner Leader Quadrant in UTM. There's just not really a comparison here if we look on the third-party validation side of things. With that, I say thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me an email, call me on my work phone there. I am always happy to answer anything. I like Fortinet, if you can't tell, but I'll be fair to other vendors, and I'll do comparisons as you need. Let me know if there's anything else you want to see. Hit that like and subscribe button, and have yourselves a good day.